I biked here and it was just very cold, so I biked fast.
Hello, we're the Raging Grannies. We ask everybody to sing along with us.
We're on a planet that's got a problem. We've got to solve it, get involved and do it now, now, now.
We need to build a better future.
Divest from fossil fuels right now.
Raging Grannies are
environmentalists.
That's right.
Yes, we're radical environmentalists. You will hear us rage and roar when oil spills reach our shores, cause we're radical environmentalists.
Right now!
We have been seeing one of the most tragic love affairs play out in the halls of power for in our city and in our nation. More than ever, we're seeing this love affair between the fossil fuel industries and those in power play out. And it's one of those relationships. You ever had a friend that's in a really crappy relationship and you're like, why are you there? How many of us have had a friend in a relationship and just a bad relationship? Let me hear your voice.
Yeah.
And you're like, you gotta get out of that. It's not good, it's self-destructive. This is what we're seeing happen with our elected officials continuing to have connections to the industries that are destroying our homes. And we want them to dump fossil fuels. Let them go. Let me hear you say, dump fossil fuels.
Dump fossil fuels.
Dump fossil fuels.
Dump fossil fuels.
They're no good for you and they're no good for us. Woo. Let me tell you another love story for today. I was born in New York City 29 years ago, and I have had the great privilege to travel to many places for my job and for leisure. And let me tell you that there is no place like home. There's no place like New York City. And that is why I'm here today. I love my city, and I know that the water protectors in North Dakota are fighting for their land because they feel the same type of love for their home that I feel for New York City and that all of you feel for New York City. Is that true?
Yes!
We love NYC.
We love NYC.
But you gotta dump fossil fuels. Pretty soon, we'll have to be making this trip down to this place in kayaks. Our homes are in danger. We saw this happen during Hurricane Sandy, during Superstorm Sandy. We saw this happen during Hurricane Irene. We are one of the communities that are at most risk, and we're still paying for the repairs for our communities and our subways from those storms till today. So we can't continue to have our leaders say that they want the best for us and that they stand up for climate when they continue to pour billions of dollars into the same companies that destroy us. And the same companies that are putting at risk the lives of Native folks in North Dakota.
TRS and NYSERS, the two largest funds of the 5 New York City pension funds, have just completed divestment from coal. Yes, so that's a good beginning. There is some movement. And also New York City has started a carbon footprint and carbon risk analysis on all of the 5 pension funds. This is a necessary first step for them to feel that they can divest from any fossil fuels. Now, we want to give a shout out and a thanks to Mayor de Blasio because he's the one who called for this study on the fossil fuels, the carbon risk and the climate risk and carbon footprint analysis. And also this past Friday, he suggested that he might be looking into divestment from Wells Fargo to follow Seattle because of DAPL. Yeah, so he's open to it, and we're going to have a speaker later on who's going to that. I'm going to read you a statement now from Tom Sanzillo. He is a great supporter of ours, and he's a former New York State Assistant Comptroller. He was not able to be here today, but he sent a statement. Comptroller Stringer's study needs to tell the city's pension fund trustees and its taxpayers how the city will manage a fossil-free portfolio. The study needs to show the public options. It is then up to the elected leaders of the city to take steps to protect the public interest from the poor financial performance of fossil fuel companies and their collective mishandling of risks created by climate change. We look forward to meeting with the comptroller and the consultants responsible for the report to discuss the future of the city's pension funds. Still hold billions of dollars in Exxon investment in New York City and another billion in the state funds. So all the time that we're investing, trying to sort of dig out and mitigate climate change by retrofitting our buildings, we're pumping our pension money into ExxonMobil and other really egregious fossil fuel polluters. Now more than ever, New York City must take bold steps to combat climate change. Divestment would be a tangible and powerful action to protect New York City pension holders and a clear statement to the global community that this is a serious and imminent threat. It's high time New York City pension funds become fossil-free. Thank you. Thank you.
40 years ago, ExxonMobil, who is now in public office at the national level, knew that fossil fuel industries would destroy our planet, our communities, our lives. And they began to pay off our representatives to keep that underground and really did hide that from the public. So this love affair is not new, and we need to let them go as soon as possible. I want to introduce now Ajani Stella from PS41. Woo! He wants to be an inventor to help solve the climate crisis and will be an ambassador today to deliver our Valentines of the petitions for Comptroller Stringer.
The Northeast U.S. will warm 50% faster than the rest of the world due to climate change. The world looks up to America, and we should be the lead example of renewable energy. Yet as we keep investing in fossil fuel and oil companies, India has started a plan to stop 60% of fossil fuel and oil companies by 2027. When we invest in fossil fuel and oil companies, it is basically saying, hey, we don't care what you're doing. Just go ahead and use our money to destroy the planet. We don't care. Instead, we can invest in companies seeking to build large plants of renewable energy, such as solar, wind, and tidal energy. 97% of scientists believe in climate change. We need to act. The only path is to change our path. Thank you for gathering for this important cause.
You know, I know Scott Stringer. Scott Stringer was a ferocious campaigner against fracking. Yes. Scott Stringer stood up for this city's water supply, and he said, there is no way you can do hydrofracking in our watershed. He was loud, he was clear, he was thunderous, he was enthusiastic, he was amazing. He was one of our leading politicians in the world in 2008 and 2009 as Manhattan Borough President against fracking. Scott Stringer actually appears in Gasland. And he talks about how everything is about water. About how when people go to Mars, they're looking for water. Well, they should come to New York City because we've got the best water in the world. Why? Because we stopped fracking in New York State and we stopped fracking in the Delaware River Basin. And Scott Stringer had a lot to do with that. So this man knows how to identify a threat. And what I have to tell you, look, you gotta, sometimes it's your friends that keep you honest, right? So Scott, I love you.
Where are you, Scott?
And I'm here
Scott!
to keep you honest, you know what I mean? If you were in college and your roommate was sort of getting a B, you'd be like, hey man, you gotta do a little bit better. You got to pick it up a bit. So Scott, in the same way that you defended this city's water supply from fracking, you have to defend this city from the rising waters of climate change, because we are under a dire threat. We are one of the 3 most vulnerable cities in this nation to rising sea levels. We are right now at 1 degree of warming. We put enough carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere to warm the climate by 1 degree. That doesn't sound like so much, but it's gotten every single thing that we need to stay frozen on this planet to start melting. If you put your Valentine's Day ice cream cake in the freezer at 32 and woke up the next morning at 33 degrees and it was a big mess, you'd be in trouble, right? You break some hearts. The bottom line here, that's what we're doing to the planet. And there's a radiative effect. We have 1.5 degrees already built into our climate warming future because we have enough carbon dioxide and methane and heat in the oceans to bring us to 1.5 no matter what we do. Now at 2 degrees of warming, we bring about an unstoppable process of 5 to 9 meters of sea level rise. We melt that many ice caps, we free up that many glaciers. 5 to 9 meters means where we're standing right now is underwater. It means that we lose the Lower East Side, we lose Williamsburg, we lose the Rockaways, we lose Red Hook, we lose huge sections of the financial district. Might not be such a problem. And you know, a lot of people come to me and they say, but Josh, I live in Park Slope. It's gonna be fine. I'm on a hill. So yeah, the Brooklyn Bridge won't be underwater, but the on-ramp will be. The subway system, which keeps this city alive, will not function at 2 degrees of climate change. It is simply suicidal for this city to continue to invest in fossil fuels. Investing means you're trying to get a better future for yourself. Investing means I'm planning ahead so that I can pay dividends on something in the future for me, for my kids, for the planet, for the city. So it makes no sense to invest in the very thing that will destroy the future for this city. You understand? So Scott, this is in your hands. Well, actually, no, it's in our hands, to be honest. Because we shouldn't be voting for any politician, no matter how good they were in the past, who will put this city in peril. We should not be voting for any politician that refuses to understand the connection between the big banks and climate change. We should not be voting for any politician that refuses to understand the connection between the big banks and the Dakota Access Pipeline, and the Dakota Access Pipeline and indigenous sovereignty and keeping this city above water.
That's right.
These things are all connected. And every single one of you, if you got money in Chase, if you got money in Citibank, if you got money in TD or Bank of America or Wells Fargo, then you got to take your money out, just like this city does. Because to be honest, you don't have money in the bank at that point. You got bullets in the bank that are shooting at journalists and at Native Americans who are standing up for their rights. You don't have money in your bank account if you're in those banks. You've got an oil spill every time you put that ATM card in. You've got fracking chemicals in the ground every time you make a deposit. That's what you've got in there. Your money doesn't stay put while you're not looking. It does all sorts of stuff. When you're not looking, it's running all over the world. It's destroying the Amazon. It's oppressing people in North Dakota. And yes, in this city. During Hurricane Sandy, New Yorkers drowned in their own houses. The water came in so fast, the preparation was so inadequate. So we have to prepare for tomorrow. And we are saying, this is our city. We are not going down without a fight. We are not going to drown in the water. Because yes, water is life. But if we don't do this right, in this city, water is also death. And we got to understand that that is what we are facing. We are facing basic issues of survival. And any politician who doesn't understand that should not survive the next political cycle, no matter how friendly we might be with them. So Scott, get with the program. Get with the program. Get our money out of the destruction of our future once and for all. That's what we demand. We're not here on February 14th, freezing, because we don't love New York City and because we don't love you. We will love you if you protect us. Thank you.
Divest now! Divest now! Divest now! Divest now! Divest now! Divest now!
20 years ago, I went to the Great Sioux Nation, and even then, they talked about saving the water from pollution. And now, they are facing this terrible, terrible threat from big, giant banks, 27 banks, and the Energy Transfer Partners, and Energy Transfer Equity, and Marathon Oil, and Phillips 66, who want to put an oil pipeline under the Missouri River. The Missouri River is the longest pipeline in the United States, and all pipelines spill. So we're talking about eventually, and maybe next year, that the Missouri River will be polluted. And if it's polluted, 18 million people downstream will not have safe drinking water ever again. So, yes, at Riverside, I founded this group, co-founded a group to advocate for divestment from fossil fuels. And here we are, and people are realizing that divestment is not just about climate change. It's not just about climate justice. It's about having water to drink and air to breathe. The planet is at risk. We have to do something if we want to have life on this planet, and we have to do it now. And the first thing people in New York City can do is to take their accounts out of these banks: Citibank, JP Morgan, TD Bank. There's an entire list on the website, defundapple.org, and also letters that you can write to the CEOs of those banks, telling them that you're going to get out of their bank because you don't want to help banks destroy the planet. And you may ask, where can you put your money? Well, there are many credit unions in New York City, all over the city, and you can deposit everywhere. And of course, there's Savings Bank and there's the Amalgamated Bank. But I don't know where you live, but the credit unions have a lot of branches and a lot of locations, and they do online, and they're also cheaper credit cards and higher rates on savings. So do look into that. So water is life, and keep that in mind. Let's protect our water everywhere in the United States, including New York City. Thank you very much.
The reason why I'm here today is I was asked to speak on climate change. How many of you have been around when they had that song that came out, "We Believe the Children Are Our Future"?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of you have been around, right?
Yep.
Do you see a lot of kids' future in tomorrow if this continues?
No.
Okay. So I like to say I think it's a good thing that's being done, and we should continue to fight and see how far it takes us. That being said, climate change is destroying our planet and our communities, and it will take everyone working on every level of government and society to fight back. We should not be giving our public money to big oil and gas companies intent of destroying the world. Low-income communities of color are more affected by climate change than the general population, and we are suffering the most. We need to take our money out of the oil companies that are polluting the planet and creating devastating storms like Hurricane Sandy. Instead, we should be investing in clean, green, renewable energy and in frontline communities to create new green jobs. We must divest the people's money from companies that are destroying the planet. We should not be complicit in humanity's destruction and instead must be part of the solution. Thank you very much.
On a daily basis, I care for children who are struggling to breathe, who have asthma. I'm really glad that Johnny spoke earlier because he reminds me of the absolute joy that I actually take at work in being able to care for children every day who are sick, who have diabetes, who have sickle cell, who need medicine and need to get better. But the people who I most take care of are asthma patients. And that's not a coincidence. The Bronx has one of the highest asthma rates in the country. And that is not a coincidence. The Bronx also has some of the highest diesel fuel trucks coming through that borough than any other borough in this city and most other localities in this country. You have huge depots in the South Bronx. You have the Cross Bronx Expressway with 18-wheelers marching through by the tens and hundreds of thousands on a daily basis. We know for a fact that fossil fuels and climate change are making asthma worse. We know for a fact that fossil fuels are poisoning our water and our air. And we know for a fact that there's alternatives to get the energy that we need. Our city hospital system has been and will continue to be the most important component of New York City's response to climate change. We in the city hospital system were the backbone of caring for patients after in the wake of Superstorm Sandy. Nurses were the ones that went out into the community and went up into high rises and made sure that people were okay when they were stranded in the Rockaways and in Staten Island and in Red Hook. There was no Army National Guard there. There was no Red Cross there. There was no city coordinated team of healthcare professionals. It was volunteers. It was Occupy Sandy. It was a range of organizations that took the time out and went and made sure those patients were safe. We were also the ones that suffered the most in many ways. Bellevue Hospital was closed for 3 months because of flooding after Superstorm Sandy. Coney Island was closed for several months after Superstorm Sandy. Nurses evacuated in the middle of the night patients down dark stairwells to get them out of those hospitals and safely transferred to other facilities. And we didn't lose one patient. We didn't lose one patient under Superstorm Sandy. City hospitals can also be the backbone of the fight to stop climate change. We can install solar panels on our buildings, we can decrease medical waste, and we can model alternative energy use. But one of the crucial ways that we can help stop climate change is with our economic power. It's ironic, as Josh said before, that our pension dollars, which help guarantee the future stability of our economic situations as city workers, are the same pension funds that are actually undermining and helping destroy those very same futures and the futures of our children. This needs to end. If we are to survive on this planet in the coming decades, we need to keep every fossil fuel in the ground. We need to join the city of Seattle, which chose to cancel its $3 billion relationship to Wells Fargo because they invested in the Dakota Access Pipeline. We as nurses and other city workers need to stand in complete and total solidarity with the water protectors in Standing Rock, South Dakota. Yes. Who are waging a heroic fight for their land, their water, and their sovereignty. In so many important ways, their fight is our fight. When they win, we win. That's right. 8 days from now, various armed forces will try and clear them from their lands on February 22nd. We cannot let that happen. From Ferguson to Standing Rock, hands up, don't shoot. The fossil fuel companies are like the tobacco companies. They are making money off of poisoning and killing people. The main difference is that the tobacco companies knowingly and systematically allowed millions of people to die, whereas the fossil fuel companies are knowingly and systematically allowing an entire planet and an entire civilization to die. That's right. They need to be dismantled, and we need to be the ones that help make that happen. Their greed blinds them, but their greed for us makes things more clear. Human need needs to come before profits. That is true in healthcare, it is true for indigenous rights, and it's also true for climate change. Scott Stringer, our comptroller, has an obligation to make this happen. He has an obligation to my asthma patients in the Bronx. He has an obligation to all city workers and really every single person living in this world to help us divest immediately from the criminal enterprise known as the fossil fuel industry. From Flint, Michigan to Standing Rock, North Dakota, water is life. From Staten Island to the Bronx, New York, we need to breathe. Let us breathe. Let us breathe. Let us breathe.
So of course, when we asked NYU to divest, they said, sure, why not? And we all got to go home. Well, that's not really what happened. After a 4-year campaign, the NYU's Board of Trustees last June sent a university-wide memo rejecting divestment. This rejection happened, right? This rejection happened despite massive support from faculty, alumni, and students, with 80% of the university senate in favor of divestment. This board of trustees is about 70 people, most of whom are wealthy and work in the financial industry, and they would not allow students to come to their meeting. They wouldn't release their notes or the count of their votes. And in fact, NYU threatened to suspend the 18 students who protested our exclusion overnight in NYU's executive elevator. And we see, as students, how the board's refusal to include the broader NYU community in its decision-making process is a microcosm of a larger trend of powerful people making critical, often life-or-death decisions, while excluding the interest and voices of young people and especially marginalized people. Our president, Andrew Hamilton, said that the enactment of a proposal to include students as board members would constitute a conflict of interests. President Hamilton, allowing people who are affected by decisions to be included in those decisions is simply a basic tenet of democracy. This is why young people are becoming engaged in the fight against climate change. We know our futures are at stake and policymakers don't have our best interests at heart. We as a generation are becoming more aware of the intersections between environmental problems and racial, economic, and gender justice, a trend that hopefully continues. Fossil fuel use and environmental degradation has been devastating marginalized communities now for a very long time. This is an immediate problem that requires immediate action. We know that to stop this crisis, we need to build a more just world. The fossil fuel industry's attempts to build more infrastructure, extract more coal, oil, and gas, and to spread misinformation on climate change and possible solutions persists at any cost. Our government pledged at the Paris Climate Agreement to attempt to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, yet continues to approve new fossil fuel infrastructure, like the Dakota Access Pipeline. Whoa. Nice job, guys. This pipeline threatens the water supply and sovereignty of indigenous populations, and furthermore, infrastructure such as this will ultimately send global temperatures soaring, which will gravely impact this generation within our lifetimes. The voices of people who will be affected by this pipeline have been notably absent from the decision making. Our generation has the most to lose from unabated climate change. Our current presidential administration has made the fossil fuel industry's influence on policymaking clearer than ever, with examples like an Exxon CEO serving as Secretary of State. As young people, we will resist harder than ever because we are not about to let young people who actively benefit from the destruction of our planet rob us of our futures. This resistance has so far been powerful, from massive pipeline protests to young plaintiffs suing the federal government over inaction on climate change. Today we're here to resist the city's inaction on divestment. Our comptroller, Scott Stringer, has spoken in favor of shareholder engagement in lieu of divestment. Engaging shareholders only works when your asks are not contrary to the entire company's business model. How likely do you think it is, Mr. Stringer, that you'll be able to convince Exxon to abandon all their reserves and stop extracting fossil fuels? Nothing less will stop climate change. If you succeed in doing that, please give me a call. I'm very curious how you'd manage to achieve that. Getting out of the fossil fuel business is not going to make Exxon a lot of money. Exxon misled the public about climate change for years to keep their profits, and I'm not sure that a heart-to-heart, even on Valentine's Day, is going to make much of a difference. The planet does not negotiate. It will not decide that improving Exxon's business practices a tiny bit is enough to stop catastrophic climate change. We cannot be invested in this industry at all. We need to stand up and say enough is enough. Institutions like NYU and governments like New York City have a lot of power and must use that power to reject companies that have devastated vulnerable communities for years, lie to the public, and pose a major threat to our society at large. We must show this presidential administration that we are not going to keep letting the fossil fuel industry run the show. To NYU and to NYC, I'd like to remind you that we cannot pretend we want action on climate change when that very action is counter to the profitability of our investments. This is a conflict of interests. If our fossil fuel stocks do well, it will only be at the cost of this planet. And may I also remind you that the breakdown of our ecosystem will be a breakdown of the economy. Our outrage at the Board of Trustees' decision has led us to start a new campaign beginning this week of calling board members who are remarkably inaccessible and letting them know our disappointment with this decision and that we question governance structures that exclude the voices of people who will be most devastated by inaction. If you'd like to make a call and help us out, go to nyudivest.com for details. This Trustee of the Week campaign will continue until we get divestment. And we are starting this Friday with John Paulson, a trustee who supported Donald Trump's campaign. NYU Divest stands with groups demanding environmental justice. We stand with the water protectors at Standing Rock, and we stand with 350 NYC's demand that Scott Stringer move forward with divestment now and stop funding the dangerous and racist Dakota Access Pipeline. It's time for NYC to stop funding climate change. Thank you.
My decision to become a teacher had nothing to do with money or financial security. Teaching is all about investing in the future of our students, our city, our country, and the world. Climate change is the single biggest threat to the survival of our planet. The things we have been able to take for granted, unpolluted air, drinkable water, and clean, plentiful food, may not be things that our children and our grandchildren can ever be assured of. As educators, we have an obligation to connect the dots of history and science and politics as we present information and help our students interpret the meaning and consequences of what has come before and what will come after us. Their future will be compromised or improved by the choices we make. This generation may be the first of many never to see thousands of animal species due to extinction, never to see a coral reef or the magnificent sea life that inhabits them. The only wild animals they might ever see are in zoos or protected parks or on television. I can't think of anything more tragic than a child beginning to discover the magnificence and the complexities of the natural world while simultaneously realizing that these things may be gone forever because we have all been such careless stewards, that our addiction to money, fossil fuels, and the comforts of excessive lifestyles have driven our choices for generations, without considering their future, Ajani's future. While studies are conducted, the climate clock is ticking. Fiduciary responsibility cannot be the excuse for wasting precious months and years before acting on all fossil fuel investments. 3 years ago, there was a proposal sponsored by City Council member Helen Rosenthal that recommended a study of the pension funds with an eye to investment. This was derailed by the controller in favor of his boardroom accountability project. And last year, TRS lost $137 million just from oil and gas investments. The urgency of this issue cannot be overstated, and the window of opportunity for addressing the problem is closing quickly. It is incumbent that our pensions be invested in a way that reflects the highest ethical choices we can make. Energy production that relies on carbon-emitting fossil fuels must be off the table forever. I do not want my pension check to reflect income from that which is destroying the planet. And I really would like the children I spent my life teaching to have the possibility of a future. Thank you.
I'm Felicia Young. I'm the director of Earth Celebrations, an environmental and arts organization in New York for over 25 years. And I want to encourage everyone this week to please, today for Valentine's Day, call Republican senators and urge them to oppose this confirmation of Pruitt, who aims to dismantle the EPA, dismantle environmental safeguards for our water, our air, our agricultural lands. He is backed by the oil and gas industries. He is aiming just to enable their profits. In New York City, we witnessed the restoration of the Hudson River over the past 50 years, largely because of community activism, Pete Seeger, watchdog groups, and the EPA that declared it a cleanup site. We cannot go back. So please, do something today. Send your Valentine message directly to these Republican senators. It's this handful of people who are enabling all of this horror to the planet and the natural resources we depend on for life. So please, take
down. People gonna rise like the water, gonna face this crisis now. I hear the voice of my great-granddaughter. Shut these pipelines down. People gonna rise like the water.